Welcome to Yacht Crew Vlogs, where we tell the stories of those in the yachting industry. A behind-the-scenes look that discovers the individuals in the industry, their history, their passions, and what inspires them to do what they do. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Yacht Crew Vlogs right here on Yachting International Radio. My name is Ria. I am your host, and today I'm very pleased to welcome Erin Carey. She is the owner of the PR agency Rome Generation. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
Good, thanks. Well, thanks for coming on board today. I've been dealing with you in the past through a few of your clients, and I wanted to ask you about your story because you got into this as a result of being a live aboard yourself. So tell me your journey. Tell me where you're from. Tell me what brought you to living aboard. Do you have sailing experience? Why the desire to take your family on a boat?
Yeah, sure. Well, it all kind of started about 2015. We were a very regular family living in the suburbs in Adelaide, Australia. My husband and I both worked for the government in regular jobs, and we were a little bit bored with life. I knew one day that we would do something big. I don't know what that was going to look like. I thought maybe, a trip around Australia or living overseas for a couple of years or something. But it never really felt like the right time. Our children were quite young, and so we weren't particularly looking for anything. But one evening we were watching Netflix, as you do, because that's pretty much the highlight of your day when you work full time and have 3 kids. And we just stumbled upon a documentary. It was called Maiden Trip by Laura Decker, and it was about her trip sailing around the world as the youngest girl ever to sail around the world. And I wasn't even planning on watching it. I was scrolling on Facebook, and my husband put it on, and I remember just kind of being captivated by it, and put my phone down, and before we knew it, 90 minutes had passed and the credits were rolling, and we both just kind of sat there and stared at the screen, and we both looked at each other and went, wow, let's do that. It was completely random. The fact that it resonated with both my husband and I is pretty much unheard of. Usually it's one or the other, and one kind of has to convince the other to come along for the ride, but it wasn't like that at all. Somehow it spoke to the both of us. So from that moment on, we kind of moved straight to the computer and we Googled families sailing around the world, because at that stage, I knew you could sail around the world, but I thought it would be more for explorers or people on, in the Navy, on ships. So I had no idea that you could live on a boat and be the captain of it yourself and sail around the world with children on board. And straight away, families started kind of coming up, photos, YouTube channels. We'd never come across any sailing YouTube channels before. It's just not something that we would have ever thought to search for. But these channels started coming up, and some of them had kids on board. And from then, our motto kind of became like, if they can do it, why can't we? So within like a couple of weeks, we'd made the decision that we were going to make it happen. We had no idea how we were going to make it happen, but we thought we will figure it out. And we started pretty much telling family and friends straight away. They thought we were absolutely insane. We were not sailors. We'd never owned a boat. We literally had no idea how we were going to make it happen. And even when they asked us, we were like, we don't know. We don't know how, but we're going to figure it out. So from there, I remember announcing at the Christmas dinner table that to my family what we were doing, and they almost like spat out their drinks and food, and my sisters laughed and said that was the stupidest thing they'd ever heard, and Mum said, oh, that's crazy, you can't do that with children, and we felt really deflated after that. And from that moment on, we were like, there's no way that this is not happening. We're going to prove them wrong, basically, because if you tell me something can't be done, then that's just my personality, that we'll figure it out. So we kind of worked backwards from there. We had no idea how much a boat costs. Like, you could have told me it was 20,000 or 500,000. Like, I literally had no idea. So we started Googling and figuring out, okay, maybe what kind of size boat we'll need to fit in 3 children and to be safe on the ocean. And eventually we just came up with a bit of a plan. I think money was our biggest obstacle. because we, like I said, had pretty regular jobs, and we had a mortgage and we had credit card debt. We weren't in a financial position to be able to take time off work and buy a yacht, but we just made sacrifices. So we did what we could to get promotions at work. We had international students living with us. Sometimes we had 2 living with us. So the kids got kicked out of their bedroom. They were like literally living in the lounge room. We converted that to like a makeshift bedroom. We had these 2 Asian students living with us at various times, and everything that was involved with having them, like we had to show them around and we had to go to activities and presentations and graduations. And so, it was a lot of work and a lot of sacrifice, but we were making extra money, which we squirreled away, and slowly we started to really get momentum. And after 2 years and 2 months, we flew out of Australia on one-way tickets to our boat, which we had bought a couple of months earlier, sight unseen, in the Caribbean. And we arrived, all 5 of us, with 10 bags and a whole heap of enthusiasm, and we figured it out. We didn't know how to move our boat from the mooring ball to, first of all, it was on the hard. We didn't know how to get it splashed in the water and then move it to a mooring ball. We didn't know how to pick up a mooring ball, but we just figured it out. And then after 18 months of cruising around the Caribbean and having an amazing time, we sailed across the Atlantic Ocean, and now we're in the Azores, and that's where our boat has been for the last 1.5 years. We haven't been here with it the whole time because of COVID, so we went back to Australia. And we've literally just arrived back to our boat last week to do part 2 of our adventure, which will take us into the Mediterranean. And then from there, who knows where.
Wow, 3 kids, that is quite the adventure too. How old were your children at the time that you got on board?
Yeah, so when we first arrived, I mean, even thinking now, it seems crazy. The littlest one was 3. 3, 5, and 7 or 8, something like that. Now they're like 6, 10, and 11. And the 6-year-old still seems like a baby. So I can't imagine how baby she must have been at 3. And I know now why our parents and everyone was worried about us, because he was pretty much a baby. He couldn't swim or anything. But yeah, we just figured it out and went slowly and had lots of help. And, as you know, the community of people involved in boats is so willing to give and help. And we just got all the help we needed to learn. And luckily my husband is very capable, and he's an aircraft technician by trade. So he was to do all of the necessary boat work that needed to be done. I think that's one of the few things, when I say anyone can do it, maybe you have to be kind of handy to be able to make it work, either that or have plenty of money to be able to pay for everything to be fixed for you. But thankfully, because of his skills, we were able to make it work. And the kids had an absolute blast. So when we got back to Australia, due to COVID, we were probably feeling same as a lot of people, a bit lost and a bit down, and we kind of didn't know where we belonged in the whole picture of things. We weren't quite land people, we weren't quite boat people. We had a foot in each camp, and it was a great opportunity for us to figure out what it was that we wanted, because we were kind of at that pivotal moment. We couldn't really afford to go back to our boat without making the decision to sell our house. And obviously selling our house was very, very big decision to make. But after being in Australia for about 10 months, we thought, you know what, we are boat people at heart. We need that adventure, and we need to be surrounded by people that are just, living their best life. And we need that excitement that we just weren't getting from the normal life in the suburbs. So we sold our house and all of our possessions, and now we're back on our boat indefinitely.
Wow, that is quite the story. Do you know, it's interesting because I have just noticed that, especially dealing with people like you in the last few years, that there are more and more people at a younger age. And I've said this time and time again, at one stage in life, it used to be, we used to imagine that you would retire and sail off into the sunset. But That's no longer the case. People are deciding at a lot younger of an age, I mean, in their 20s, in their 30s, that they're not going to waste their time until retirement working and living the status quo. They're going to go out and they're going to adventure, and they're going to do it now, and they're going to figure out a way to make it happen and live their best life while they have the time. And it's amazing because with the internet, that is a possibility nowadays. Whereas prior to the internet, perhaps that's why people had to wait to retire in order to do the sailing off into the sunset.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And that was a huge part of deciding what we wanted to do and following through with it. Yeah, of course, it was super scary selling our house, but we just kept reminding ourselves that we won't get this time again, especially with our children at the ages they are. The eldest is due to start high school in a couple of years. And, by the time he gets to 15, 16, he's not going to want to be on a boat, quite frankly, with his mum and dad 24/7. So we figured we've got this really precious amount of time that, 4 or 5 years isn't long, and we wanted to really make the most of it. And you know what, so what if our retirement fund is smaller than what it was going to be? But I think deep down we knew, or we believe that it won't be. We just believe that we're doing the right thing. And I've got my business now, and I don't think it's going to set us back. If anything, I think it's going to put us in a better position, because we're fulfilled. We're living our dream. We're surrounded by amazing people all the time. You're so much more inspired out here as well. So, business ideas come and you meet people, and I'm confident that things are going to arise along our journey that is going to put us in a better position than what we would have been if we had have just stayed in the 9 to 5 and diligently built up our savings and contributed to our superannuation and retired at a reasonable time. Yes, look, we probably would have been quite comfortable, but I'm willing to take that risk. And I know myself and I know my husband, we're not going to be living under a bridge, because we just won't let that happen. We're going to do everything we can to make the best life for us. And I think giving this gift to our children is, I couldn't be more opposite from my friends. And I remember having this conversation before we left, like they're sending their children to some of the best schools in our hometown, and they're doing all of the extracurricular activities and playing in all the sports teams and learning instruments. And sometimes I definitely have fears that we're doing the wrong thing, because our kids won't have any of that. They won't be in team sports, and they're learning completely online, and they won't have the stable peer relationships, because when you live on a boat, you're always moving. But also I think deep down, I hope that what we're giving them is going to make them really unique and special, especially when it comes to the job market and in later in life when they come to set up their own businesses or have their own careers, because this lifestyle really teaches you a lot. And I hope and believe that it's going to put them in a better position had they've just gone to a normal school and had a normal education.
Have you found that since you've been out there, there are more and more people with children making that same decision?
Look, I think so. Certainly in the Caribbean, there were children everywhere. And I know a lot of people were concerned about our children and their socialization skills. That was not an issue at all. They were constantly socializing. But the beautiful thing was they were socializing with, children of all different ages and sexes and religions and cultures. And they were, playing with children that didn't even speak English, yet they still managed to communicate, and they would have the confidence to go up and order food in another language. And, they were used to dealing with different currencies, and, we'd climb volcanoes on our afternoon off after school. Like what kids could say that they do things like that just on a regular day. So there are a lot of families out here. I'm not entirely sure of the effect COVID has had on that. I think it's had a bit of a two-pronged effect. some have gone home because they were probably out here at the initial onset of COVID, and some of them were forced to have to isolate on their boats for a long time. I've heard of families that were literally stuck on board for 2 to 3 months and not allowed to leave. That would have been horrendous with children. But then there's the next kind of round of families that have thought, life's short, and COVID certainly taught us that. And now that they've had a taste of homeschooling children, which, let's be honest, is very difficult, but they've had that taste now. They know it's possible. They've potentially been working from home for the last 12 months as well. And people are starting to question the status quo and the 9 to 5 and the rat race. So there's this whole new wave of people that are starting to, buy the vans and do van life. And I believe that boat life is becoming like the next van life. So, you do a Google search for hashtag boat life. There's half as many entries as there are van life. I mean, I know that that's still quite a difference, but you might have 8 million entries for van life. There's 4 million for boat life. It's getting more and more popular. You only have to do a quick Google search in the media and there's more stories popping up about it. And more people are realizing that, you don't have to be retired and wealthy and in all of your sailing gear and your boat shoes to live on a boat. You can be a regular family. And I'm not so naive to believe that everyone can do it. Obviously, you have to have some money behind you. But, I like to stress to people that we are, and certainly were, a very middle-class family, and we've made it work. So I think, if we can figure it out, then certainly lots of other people who might not have ever entertained the idea, they could certainly figure it out as well if they really want it.
Well, I mean, a lot of these people, what they do is they set up YouTube channels, they have Patreon accounts, and people follow them, subscribe to them by YouTube, etc. You've done it differently, though. You are actually representing these people as opposed to being the one that is in the limelight. What made you decide to do that?
Yeah, the amount of people that said to us, you should set up a YouTube channel. First of all, I was like, that doesn't interest me at all. I'm not, great at speaking on the camera. My husband's even worse than I am. And I didn't fancy having my life out there. I used to say, why does anyone want to watch, me yelling at 3 boys all day long? You're like, honestly, that's what happens on our boat. It's hectic. And so after being out, we'd saved up enough money to last 2 years. That's what we had hoped on our initial sabbatical. After being out there for about a year, our money had dwindled faster than we had hoped. And I was also looking for some more of fulfillment and a challenge. As much as I absolutely loved cruising and everything that entailed exploring, obviously lots of beach time, drinking cocktails, it's not always like that. It's definitely hard work, but I felt like I wanted to contribute to the family a little bit more and bring in some money. So I started thinking, well, what skills do I have that I can capitalize on while we're out here? And I actually started writing. So I was writing for all of the top sailing magazines. And in that process, I got to interview lots of amazing people. And one of those people that I got to interview was Lynn Party. She's a very well-known author, a sailor. She's circumnavigated the world twice, once in each direction, both times in boats under 30 feet, wooden handmade boats without engines. Like, she's an incredible woman. And it was like a pinch me moment. I got to have, meetings with Lynn, and she was almost like a mentor to me. And she was helping me, come up with story angles and connecting me with different people that I could interview for stories. And one of the stories that I was fascinated in exploring was whether or not these YouTube channels were a viable way to make money while cruising, because it seemed like every man and their dog had a YouTube channel. It was almost like we felt like, a bit of a FOMO. Are we missing out on something here? Because everyone's got a YouTube channel except us. But we felt so busy that we used to say, I don't actually know how we would fit a YouTube channel into our life, because the YouTubers that we'd meet up with, they were working like 40 hours a week or more. They were down below in their cabin, constantly editing. Whenever they went out, they were taking cameras with them. And it just didn't look like what I wanted to do. So anyway, I spoke to Lynn and I said, look, Lynn, you've been cruising the world for 40 years or so now. How do people used to make money to sustain this lifestyle back in your day? And she said, we live simply. Her motto was go smaller, go now. And she said we would cruise into these harbors and our boat always looked, really lovely, because Larry is a boat builder and the boat was his pride and joy. And people would see our boat and go, wow, your boat's amazing. We need help, varnishing our woodwork or doing our bottom job or whatever. And she said everywhere we went, we would always get employment. We would work for 6 months of the year and then we would cruise for 6 months of the year. And they just sustained that model for quite a while. Then Lynn became a writer and she was writing for the sailing magazines. And again, this was like back in the day where you literally had to post your article into the magazine and wait to get correspondence back. And so then she sustained their sailing career through writing for magazines. And she said to me, she goes, I'm really quite perplexed by this whole YouTube phenomenon, because there are easier ways to make money. She said, unless they honestly love what they're doing and that's fulfilling their creative outlet. And that's certainly the case for many of the YouTube channels. If like filming and editing is your passion, that kind of shines through, and they're the channels that are really successful. But if you think that you're going to buy a boat and just set up a YouTube channel and that's going to pay for your cruising lifestyle, it's just not realistic. It doesn't work that way. So anyway, I wrote this really comprehensive article. I interviewed like 20 YouTubers, and basically I discovered the same message coming through every YouTuber, was that they were really busy and they were swamped, spending all of their time filming and editing. They didn't have time to promote themselves. And of course, YouTubers, they need those followers and likes and subscribers and patrons to be able to survive, basically. So I kind of realized that there was a bit of a business model there where I could help those people get their stories out into the world, help spread brand awareness and raise the following that they were looking for. And my lucky break kind of came when I was in the same anchorage as SV Delos, which was are the number 2 YouTube sailing channel in the world. And I interviewed them for a story and we got to know each other, and I wrote a story on them and they got them into a few magazines, and they were like, hey, can you keep doing this for us? And, I did. And I was so grateful to have SV Delos as a client, because they were literally one of the first YouTubers that we discovered when we got on the computer that night and started Googling. And for the next 2 years, we watched them like as often as we could. And so when we met them and when I wrote a story on them and when I started working for them, it was like these guys were literally our idols and now they're my client. And so that was really exciting. And when I started pitching them to magazines, I was like, hey, I'm doing PR for you guys now, that basically, why don't I create a business out of this? So I did. I set up my own PR agency and we've grown and now have team members in different parts of the world. And basically now I have kind of grown that into a business that shares the stories and promotes the stories of people that are living an inspirational lifestyle, and that kind of grew into brands that in the travel and adventure space, and then into destinations. So I'm traveling to these amazing places in the world, like take the Azores for example, or the Azores, I think that's how you guys say it. They're these most stunning archipelago of islands in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And I mean, I love travel and I've traveled to over 45 countries. but I had never heard of them prior to getting on a boat and sailing here. And most people in Australia will tell you the same thing. We just don't know that this part of the world exists. So I wanted to start promoting the destinations that, you know, I'm fortunate enough to be visiting on our journey. And so, yeah, that's what I do. My PR agency is for all of those things that I mentioned. And honestly, I feel like I have just made or created the absolute best kind of business for me and for our lifestyle, because now it allows us to continue traveling the world, and I get to work with absolutely amazing and inspiring people every day. So I love my job.
Well, that's amazing. Have you noticed that there has been a change in the need for your services in the past year? Has it sort of bottomed out? Has it evened off? And do you see that changing in the future?
Yeah, so when the pandemic first came about, as most people did, people got nervous and you know, stopped using me for a couple of months there. And then I think once we kind of figured out that this actually wasn't going to be a bad thing for these YouTubers, because a lot of people are at home, a lot of people are dreaming of getting away one day and eventually living maybe an alternative lifestyle, because we've kind of figured that we can now. They started watching these YouTube channels more and more. And for most of the sailing YouTube channels, if not all, I'd say their subscribers and their viewers have increased. So for me, luckily, I've been able to continue with most of the clients that I had, and then also bring on new clients. But the longer this is kind of going for, the more I think, you know, people are wondering when this will ever come back, especially now that I'm in the travel kind of niche. I think we all got quite excited that the vaccine might bring travel back sooner rather than later. Now it's, you know, we're wondering, will it make much difference? Is it still going to be a little while? So obviously the destinations are, you know, hard to get clients in that area, because Australia can't even literally leave our country at the moment. So America is much the same. Most people aren't traveling. So yeah, the pandemic has definitely affected my business. But, you know, luckily I have been able to sustain it and grow it through this period. So I keep telling myself, you know, I've been able to create and sustain a business during the pandemic. Wait until the pandemic's ended and watch me boom.
Watch this space. So
Yes.
Your ideal client then is somebody who is into travel, is into seeing the world, the adventurer. It's not for mom and pop that are setting up a home-based business. It is for those that want to see the world and explore.
Yeah, exactly. It's for someone who's living a unique lifestyle or promoting a unique lifestyle, or a brand that assists in, you know, living unique lifestyles. So it encompasses, you know, lots of different things. I live on a boat, and I intimately understand this lifestyle. So it only makes sense that marine brands, somebody that I could work with, along with the sailing YouTubers, which then also naturally include travel YouTube channels. And then, yeah, like I said, the destinations that I'm visiting along the way. So if it's got something to do with travel and adventure, then I'm a girl.
Well, you know what? We're going to make sure to include all of your details underneath this interview when it airs. Erin, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on board here today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we wish you the best of luck. Once again, you've been watching another edition of Yacht Crew Vlogs right here on Yachting International Radio. My name is Ria. I have been your host. Please tune in again next week for another episode.